Hi everyone, welcome to my part 3 of the Diane Von Furstenberg wrap dress, where I'm making vlogs as I'm sewing the dress and taking you through all the steps, the process, any things I'm changing, and just how I am dealing with this vintage pattern. So I meant to grab the pattern packet before. This is the pattern, the Diane Von Furstenberg, very easy wrap dress. Now I've done a lot since the last vlog, so let's get you up to speed. So I was talking about what stay I was going to use for the front of the bodice and for the waist, where it requires that you use a stay. And I did use this iron-on fusible tape. Now, because this tape is dead straight though, as you can see, and the bodice, it's got quite a curve to it, so I had to cut it in sections and press it on. And then I did just top stitch it in place as well, because it was in sections, it seemed like a bit of it wanted to come off. And because it's a jersey knit, I think as much as I adhered it, some of it was just coming off. So I did use the iron-on stabilizer, I cut it into smaller sections. So I'd lay down a piece, and as soon as the curve curved a bit too much for the tape, I'd just cut another piece and lay it on. So then I fused it all down with the iron, and then I just stay stitched over the top of it just to keep it in place. So that is what I used for the stay on the front of the bodice here. You can still see it because I haven't sewn the facing yet, so you can see it there. And I used it, I totally forgot to do it on the back because I sewed the back to the skirt and then realized I'd never put it on, but I definitely used it on the front. And I think more than anything, it probably does need it on the front because you are pulling, and because of those sashes that you're pulling, or the belt. I think I keep calling it a sash, but it's a belt in the pattern. These lovely bits that tie it up. So that's what I used for the stay. What I wrote down when I was doing this was, when you are sewing it, when you usually sew side seams, I think we're very used to, you sew the side seams, you overlock them together and then press them. One thing to note, and I only know this because I've made many a wrap dress that always has a sash or a belt that goes through a little opening in your side seam, is to not overlock your side seams together. So maybe put notes everywhere for you. Like I said, because I've sewn so many wrap dresses, I knew to not do this, so I overlocked my side seams separately before I even sewed the side seams. So just make a note to do that, because I made that mistake so many times on other wrap dresses. If you've got a sash going through an opening, you need to overlock those side seams separately. So just do that on both sides. You could do one and overlock it together and leave the other one open, but I think just to be safe, just do both sides and overlock them separately, then do your side seams. Now on side seams, what I will do is I'm talking through with the mannequin here, and then I'll take you through at the desk so I can show you up close some of the things I'm talking about. So on the topic of side seams though, and I'll show you on the pattern, the gap that the pattern suggests you leave is gigantic. So I think it's almost like 14, maybe it's huge. Let's go with 14 centimeters, 10 centimeters. It's really big. And as soon as I went to put the dress on and put the sash or the belt through, you could see a lot of my skin, and I thought, well, I'm gonna make that opening a lot smaller. So this is the opening that the belt goes through, and it's visible, like you can see your skin or your side at the side. So one thing I would definitely do, I need to go back and make this a fair bit smaller because it looks huge to me. And I think you can see a bit of the mannequin there, but yeah, you can definitely see a lot of skin. So I need to make that opening much smaller. It doesn't need to be a huge opening either, because look at the jersey, it really comes down quite a fair bit. So you can push that through quite a small opening. So I'll probably take it down to maybe 5 centimeters, but I'll show you on the pattern what I mean with that one as well. So the gap for the sash, and the other thing I nearly forgot, I went to sew the skirt front to the bodice front, and I didn't realize there were these little gathers at the front, and I thought, why aren't the notches matching up? Went back and looked at the pattern, and I thought, that's right, it does say gathers on the side. So the way I did these little gathers at the front, I just did a gathering stitch. So I put the seam allowance, I did like a stay stitch, and you hold your finger behind the pedal, and that kind of crunches up the fabric. I've got a few reels on this if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's like what's it called, crimping, like an easing crimping stitch. You use it in sleeve heads a lot of the time. It's just really easy to get any kind of gathering in. So I did this crimping stitch on the bottom of the bodice, and then that sort of gathered in the fabric enough, because it's not a huge amount of gathering on the front bodice. So there's 2 little gathering sections, and if you went to sew it, you'd see that the bodice is too big for the skirt. So you need to add in these little gathered sections on the front bodice on both sides. So yeah, I did a little crimping stitch, that gathered it enough, and then I was able to just sew the skirt on. So yes, I've put the since last time I did the stay, I've sewn the collar on, I sewed the sleeves on, I've sewed obviously the back to the back skirt and sewed the front to the front skirt. I've sewn the sashes on, so a fair bit of progress. I'm not finished yet. And one thing's with the sleeves, as soon as I sewed the sleeves and I just popped them on, I knew they were way too big. So I'll just hold up here. I think I've still got some of the pins in it to show you. Oh, I did take the pins out. But first of all, the sleeves are too long, so I'm taking off about 3.5 centimeters from the length of the sleeve, and then I'll show you at the desk how I'm running it in just from the armpit down to the wrist. I think it's about 2.5 centimeters, but I'll show you that. So from keeping it here the same distance, oh, there is still a pin stuck in there, and then just running in a pretty straight angled line down to the wrist. So the sleeves are probably the biggest alteration I've had to make to this dress. So that's it. I'll take you to the table. I'll talk you through some of the things. Also with making the sleeve different, going to have to alter the size of the cuff, the width of the cuff. So I'll show you that at the table as well. So that's where I'm up to. And then I'll come back up here and run through what I've got to do to finish. Okay, we're over at the table. So I just wanted to show you, this was the iron-on tape that I used, and you can see it's got little glue dots on there. So as I was saying, I just cut it into sections so I could meet the curve of, say, the curve on the skirt here, for instance. So I'd lay a section, and then when the curve got a bit too much, say there, I'd then cut it and then just do another section. So I think this works really well for stabilizing as well. And this one's from Tessuti Fabrics if you're in Australia and was wondering. It's super cheap as well, it's $3. So that was what I used there. Now let me show you this gap on the sash, the belt. I just want to call it a sash. This bit that goes around here. So on the pattern, here is the skirt back, and there's the skirt back and there's the bodice back. Or maybe I got a bit excited when I said 14 centimeters, but it seems huge with the jersey. I think that's why it seems so big. So obviously we'd have to add in the seam allowance there, but if we were going to measure it 14 to 14, that is an 8 centimeter gap there. So that's where the sash is going through. But on the jersey, it just seems to stretch to so much more than that. So I think I'll be taking it down to maybe even 4 centimeters, because I know with the jersey, it will stretch even more. So it'll still be almost like a 5 or 6 centimeter opening. So that is something to be mindful of, because it's just huge for the sash. The sash is not that wide. Let me just bring over the sash. I'll take it off the dress so I can show you. So that's the jersey when it's sort of how you'd push it through. So that's really all you need. Maybe, yeah, 3 centimeters max. You absolutely don't need this much. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So let me move that out of the way. So one thing I also wanted to mention, when you're doing the construction of the sash, because they are quite long, or the belt, sorry, when you're sewing it, do not sew the angled part first, then the rest of the length of the sash. Always, because it's jersey, it will move and it will stretch a little bit. And so what you always wanted to be doing is sewing the longest part first, because it's never going to match up perfectly, even if you use lots of pins and whatever. If you have sewn this bit first, as you do the longer part of the sash, you're going to get a bit of a bubble here. And it always happens like that. So always do the longer part of the sash or the belt first, and then you've got a bit of wiggle room here. So if it's like even 2 mil off, you can then sew the angle. So if you do it the other way around, you're going to end up with some excess fabric on one side here. And it's just a simple part of construction, just the order that you do it. It doesn't take any longer. Just be mindful to always do the longest part first and then do your angle, because otherwise you'll get a bubble. Trust me, I did one side where I sewed this first and then the angle, and then the other one, I don't know why, but I thought I'll do the angle first. And of course, as I sewed this, I ended up with too much fabric here. You could also sew the angle and then sew this way, which is the direction I probably should have done. But yeah, just don't sew towards something that's already sewn, because you'll get a bubble in fabric. Have to unpick it all, try and ease it in, or just redo the whole thing. So that's just a little tip when you're sewing the belts or the sash. So I'll show you here with the sleeve just how much I have changed it or taken it in. So here's the original sleeve. So I'll pop that there. Now, when you do any alterations to patterns, you've always got to draw in your seam allowance first. So there's the 1.5 seam allowance. That's drawn in. So there's the original sleeve. And I think you can see here that that's how much I've taken off. So a fair bit. I think it was 2.5. Let me just check. It's like 2.5 centimeters. So that's a substantial amount. I have trimmed it in just because I didn't kind of like how flappy it is. So that's on the sleeves. Obviously you've got to do that to both sides. You can see there. So I've angled it drawn the seam allowance from the underarm all the way down to the end of the arm. But when you do that, what you're also going to have to alter is the cuff, because the cuff obviously attaches to the sleeve. So I then needed to take in the cuff and also the cuff facing. Now I think you can see that I sort of divided it into 3. I did have a dressmaker help me with this because I was getting some other things altered. So it was great just to have another professional's opinion on how to take in the cuff. So we divided it into 3 and then drew in the seam allowance again to just make sure that the cuff, when the seam allowances are all on, will match up with my new sleeve. So I'll zoom in a little bit there so you can see. So you imagine when we attach the cuff to the sleeve, that will match up with the new lines I've drawn in for the sleeve to match up there. So if you're going to bring in the sleeve like I did, just remember you're going to have to do it to the cuff and to the cuff facing. So not too hard to do, to be fair. But yeah, just divide it into 3, or I think we took out a bit from the middle as well. But essentially you're getting whatever you've taken off the sides, you're just going to need to do it to the cuff as well, because otherwise the cuff is going to be way too big and won't fit on the sleeve. But you want to keep the integrity of this, the cuff and the lovely curve on it. So if you're going to do alterations to the sleeve, sleeve facing and the sleeve cuff. So that was the changes to the sleeve. Now lastly, something I just wanted to point out, when you're sewing, this is a cuff, but when you're sewing the collar, look, it looks very similar to this, and you're going to have the same thing, as in you're going to have fabric with the interfacing, and you're going to have fabric on its own. So just a construction tip here, when you are sewing a piece of fabric that doesn't have interfacing and a piece that does, just remember that this is going to have nowhere near as much give in it. So what you always want to do is have this facing you when you're at the machine sewing it. Reason being is that the feed dogs will push through the fabric that's sitting on the bottom faster. And if you have it the other way around, remember that this on the bottom then has no movement to it, and you're going to end up with too much fabric on the top because this has no stabilizing to it. So that's just a great construction tip I thought I should share with you, because I started to sew the collar and went, oh, hold up, and needed to flip it around. So always have the interfacing facing you. You'll have a lot less dramas with your construction and getting your seam allowances perfect. So when you've got an interface piece and just a normal piece of fabric, always have that interfacing facing you. And the last thing I did want to show you, just close up of those gathers that I was talking about, because I'm sure they're a little bit hard to see when I had it on the mannequin. So you can see it's really slight, but that's the little gathers on the front of the bodice. So there's the front, that's where the belt is. So you can see it's really quite minimal, and obviously on this fabric it's quite full on, but I just did a little crimping, easing stitch on the bodice and then matched up all those notches for the bodice to match the skirt, and there you go. So there you have it. Not a heap of gathers, but just enough to add in a bit more fullness to the bust on this dress. So I hope that was good, seeing a lot of that stuff up close. I think it's easier than me trying to point out things on here. So what is next? Because I still haven't finished it. So I still have to add the whole front facing on. I know the dress almost looks done, but it's not. I think just the print is making it look like that. So I've still got to do the facing. I've got to take in that hole where the belt goes through because it's way too big. I'm also going to reinforce it a bit. I think I might just go over it with a cover stitch or top stitch it, just to keep those seam allowances down and so they don't sort of come through when you pull the belt through. So yeah, I've got to do the whole front facing. And the other thing I want to do, I'm going to get some self-covered buttons, so buttons covered in the same fabric, because the cuff, which is beautiful and goes like this on the sleeve, and I think I've got the angle right on this, so it will look like that when it's done, and you need to put a button there. So I'm going to get some buttons covered in the same fabric. I think that'll just finish it off really nicely rather than just using a random button. So yeah, I'll get some fabric covered buttons for the cuff. And then obviously, I think I'm saying obviously too much. The last thing is I have to hem it. That's what you've always got to do at the very end. So facing, I need to take in the sleeves. I need to add the cuffs and the cuff facing onto the sleeve now that they're smaller, and then I need to hem it. I think that's it. I think that'll be it. I'll look at my list. So it says still lots to do. I've got to sew that gap in. I've got to do the facing. I want to get some self-covered buttons for the cuffs, take the sleeves in, sew on the cuffs, the cuff facing, and then I can hem it, and then it will be done. I still kind of laugh a little bit at this being a very easy Vogue dress, because I've been sewing for 20 plus years and I wouldn't say this is a very easy dress. I think if you watch videos of how other people have made it and all the things they ran into, like this video I'm making here, I think it might be a bit easier to make, but I wouldn't say it's the simplest dress, especially if you want to make some alterations to it, because something as simple as, oh, I'll just run the sleeve in, then you think, oh, I've actually got to change the cuff and the cuff facing, and that's a fair bit more work. Now, I know I do kind of run through how I made the cuff smaller. I might do that as a separate video or reel, so let me know if you would like that, and I can definitely make it. So I will be back for either a part 4, or I might do like a finale or final part 4 vlog where I talk through maybe just everything really quickly that you should take note for if you're making this dress. So then you can watch all of my vlogs, or you can just watch the final where I run through everything. But at least these ones I'm going in detail and you can see the close-up what I'm saying. So I hope you all enjoyed part 3. Yeah, chat to you later. Thanks. Bye.